Now, I love a bougie garden centre as much as the next person, but if you ask me, gardening shouldn't have to cost a fortune. So if you want maximum yield for minimal cost, join me for 5 hacks that will help you grow more for less. Hi folks, and welcome to The Wild Patch. If you're new here, my name's Leanne, this is my YouTube channel, and I am so glad that you decided to join me today. Of course, if you're not new here, I am equally as happy to see you. And you may have noticed we've had a little bit of a glow up around here. But don't worry, I'm still going to be talking about all things living and gardening with maximum creativity and zero faff. So I was hoping to get outside in the garden today, but although the sun is shining, it is absolutely blowing a gale. So I thought we could just have a cosy chat in my office today. And I wanted to talk about the cost of gardening, especially for new gardeners. So a little bit of history for you. I started gardening back in 2019. And for the few years before that, I was longingly watching Gardener's World on BBC and some fantastic creators here on YouTube who are living their best homesteading life while I was cooped up in a tiny flat in Swindon. And it was those people that inspired me that when I moved back home to the West Country, I got my first allotment. And I was super excited about it until my first visit, and it was super weedy, super clayey, and on the side of a very steep hill. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Because I watch all of these creators who've got these fantastic setups. They've got huge greenhouses, polytunnels, lighting setups, heat mats, everything to set them up for success. And I was standing there looking at my little patch of land, just wondering how on earth I was going to be an expert gardener like them, and just thinking that's never going to happen. But that's not really true, is it? Because we as humans have been farming and gardening for tens of thousands of years, way before the invention of polytunnels and greenhouses. And all our ancestors really needed was a patch of land and some seeds. And that's all we need as well. So I've had a little think about it and about the sort of things that I wish I'd known when I'd first started gardening. And I've come up with 5 low-cost or zero-cost hacks to help new gardeners or even more seasoned gardeners get growing without the huge cost. So let's get into it. So diving straight into tip number 1, let's talk trash. So we, people in general, throw away or recycle tons of items that can be reused for gardening. Things like plastic trays, jars, tin cans, cardboard, or my favourite, toilet rolls. All of these things can be reused for gardening purposes. So you can grow herbs in tin cans. Just make sure you drill some holes in the bottom first. You can use the trays from your berries or your mushrooms as starter seed trays, like I've done here. These already had drainage holes in the bottom, which made it even easier. All I did was fill up with some potting compost, add some seeds, water, and place on a windowsill, and you have got free trays. Now, personally, I love using toilet roll tubes. They're an everyday household waste product that would ordinarily just go straight in the recycling. Now, I like using these for a few reasons. Firstly, they're tall, which means they're great for plants with long roots. So things like your peas, your beans, sweet peas, which is what I'm going to be using them for today. They're compostable. They'll break down in the soil. So it means you can transplant your seedlings into the ground or into pots without disturbing the roots. So these are really easy to convert into root trainers, which you can buy, but it does all add up. And literally all you do is take your toilet roll, put a few snips in the bottom and fold it up to close the bottom so your soil doesn't all fall out. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be closed. And then you fill that up with your soil, seed, water, and then I like to pop them into something like an ice cream tub, which when you add multiple, you can stuff them all in and they'll stand up on their own. Then when you go to plant your seedlings out, you just have to remove the toilet roll, unfold the bottom, pop it in the ground.
easy. So tip number 2 is aptly numbered because it's all about making use of naturally occurring organic waste. Poop. Poop, manure, fertiliser, brown gold, whatever you want to call it, it is absolutely essential for the garden. So I am lucky enough to have a rabbit, and the way Molly pays her rent around here is by letting me collect up all of her used litter and use it on my garden. Now, the first time I did this was a few years ago, and it was just a bit of an experiment really. And I had 2 rabbits at the time, so every week I would just collect up all of their used bedding and put it around the base of my bean plants. So I had Bolotis, Greek Gigantes and French green beans all on the same patch, all mulched with used rabbit bedding, and let me tell you, it was the best harvest I have ever had. For a few reasons. Firstly, all of that waste breaks down and feeds the soil. Beans are really, really hungry plants, so all of that extra feed really did wonders. The second thing was adding it as a mulch stopped the weeds growing around the base of the plants. Now obviously there were some weeds growing in the mulch. We are using hay, which has grass seed in it, but because it's quite a thick layer, you can quite easily pull any weed seeds out as they come up. So there are 2 different types of manures that you can use. The first is cold manure, which is what I use, and that comes from animals like rabbits, guinea pigs, chickens, ducks. And that's easy enough to get hold of if you have your own pet or if you have friends and family with any of those animals. If you don't, there are still other ways to get hold of it. For example, you could volunteer at an animal shelter and give your time in exchange for use of some of that bedding. I'm sure there are plenty of charities near you that would be happy for the extra pair of hands. The second type is hot manure, and that comes from animals like cows and horses. Now the thing with hot manure is that you can't put it straight on the garden fresh from the animal, for lack of a better phrase. You have to wait until it is broken down and rotted. So that's why you'll normally find signs saying well rotted manure. That means it is broken down enough to be safe to use on your plants. Now, not everybody has access to a horse or a cow in their back garden, but there are still ways to get hold of that sort of manure if you want to use it. If you are in an area with farmyards or livery yards, a lot of the time they will bag up the waste and place it outside their front gate with an honesty box system, and it's usually 50p or £1 a bag. And that is a really cheap and easy way to get hold of valuable nutrients for your plants. So yeah, poo, kind of gross, but also really good for the garden. Who knew? So tip number 3 is to embrace community spirit. I honestly can say that the gardening community is one of the most friendly, helpful and wholesome communities I've ever been a part of. Everyone is so passionate about what they do, and all they want to do is help as many people as possible get into it, and that's fantastic. So there are a few ways that you can harness this community spirit to help you with gardening. The first one is getting hold of space. So if you're in a flat or rental accommodation where you have no space to grow your own, perhaps you have a neighbour or a friend or family member nearby who has a garden but is unable to look after it. You could perhaps volunteer your time to look after their garden in exchange for a little bit of space to grow your own fruit, veg or flowers. I think this is the pinnacle of community spirit, where you're both really helping each other out. They're getting somebody to look after their land, you're getting space to grow your own food or flowers. And I think that's brilliant. The second part of community spirit is online communities. So Facebook is a fantastic place to find local gardening groups where you can swap tips, news, or hear about events in your local area. So I belong to a few different Facebook communities. There's one for my local allotment where we can just talk about what's going on, or I've lost a glove, has anybody seen it? Or whose water butt is this that's flown over onto my plot? And it's a really good way to find out who is working around you. And also if you're going on holiday, you can always ask somebody to water your plants, which is really useful. I'm also part of a Facebook community for my county. And that's super useful because it's a place where you can hear about local events, local weather forecast even, But most importantly, making connections with people who are growing in the same environment and situation and climate as you are. So I just mentioned local events, and that takes me on to my third point. So near me, we have all sorts of events. We have our local growing community where they have a sort of a show, and you can see what everybody else is growing, and it's the sort of who can grow the biggest marrow, who can grow the prettiest daffodils, all those sorts of things, and they're really fun to just be a part of. We also have things like seed swaps and plant swaps, where you can all go to your village hall, turn up with any extra seeds you have and swap them for things that you haven't grown before or you don't already have in your collection. And that's a really good way of finding out about new varieties, and also hearing from other gardeners about what grows well in their garden, because if it's a local event, chances are the things that grow well for your neighbours will probably grow well for you as well, because you're in a similar environment and climate. So lastly is a way you can make money. So if you have those extra seeds, sow some extra seedlings and sell them at plant sales, or swap them for other plants. It's a really great way to get rid of your excess, help others out who have perhaps not been able to start their plants as early, and also find out about other varieties that people around you are growing. So tip number 4 is all about seeds. Seeds are probably my biggest expense in a gardening year, because I love to try new varieties, new things, and to be honest, I'm very easily influenced by people on Instagram. But you do not have to spend a fortune on seeds. I just mentioned local seed swaps and plant swaps, which were a great way to get hold of seeds, but also there is seed saving. Now, a plant's sole purpose, whether it's a fruit, vegetable, or a flower, is to reproduce and come back the following year, which means they need to find a way to create seeds. And we can make the most of that natural process by enabling and letting the plant create seeds and then collecting them for ourselves. So it doesn't matter whether you're growing a cauliflower, some garlic, a dahlia, they will all produce seeds or bulbs which you can harvest for use next year. So the most simple example of this is peas and beans. And we eat the seeds from those plants. So all you need to do for those is leave a few pods on the plant for as long as you possibly can. And right at the end of the season, let them dry off and go brown, pick them off the plant as you normally would when you harvest, and pop those dried seeds in an envelope for next year, making sure you label what they are. The important thing is storage here for any seed, and that is to make sure that they are stored in a cool, dry place. Any mouldy seeds, any damp seeds will be no good next year, so please don't save them. And if you see that they're starting to mould or go a little bit rotten, get rid of them as soon as possible before they contaminate your other seeds. So another good example of this is broccoli, cauliflower, kale. If you leave any of those in the ground long enough, they will what's called go to seed. And that means they will send up flowers. And they're lovely bright yellow flowers usually that the bees and other pollinators absolutely love. And once they go over, they turn into seed pods. And all you need to do is collect them, dry them, envelope, box until next year. Perfect. Now, some people save seeds from supermarket food or food from restaurants when they've been out and about. Say you've eaten a lovely salad with a gorgeous tomato in it, save some of the seeds. This does work. But there is a but here. Often these varieties that you find widely available at supermarkets, especially things like peppers and tomatoes, are what's called an F1 variety. Now what F1 means is it's a hybrid fruit which has been grown from 2 or more different types and bred to have certain characteristics. Those characteristics are normally lengthening shelf life or aiding the ability to be transported. They're very rarely for flavour. But what you can do, you can take your pepper seeds after you've chopped it up and put it in your fajitas and dry those seeds out and plant them. What I would say is you will almost definitely get a plant, providing that you sow the seeds correctly, but you might not get the plant you think you're going to. But because these F1 hybrids aren't stabilised hybrids, the plant might grow into one of the parent plants and not have the characteristics of the plant you originally took the seed from. So you can sow supermarket plants, but you might not get what you think you're going to get. It's a cool experiment either way though, I think. Now, the last tip I have for you today is something that every single gardener should be doing without fail, and that is composting. There are several different ways to compost, but the most popular is obviously with a compost bin. If you take a look around any allotment site, you'll see every single plot has at least one compost bin that's filled with varying levels of waste material. You can compost pretty much anything depending on what method you use. So for your generic compost bins, you can put pretty much any garden waste into there. So sticks, leaves, grass clippings, dead plants, etc. Just make sure that if you're putting dead plants in there, you're not putting weed seeds in there, because the weeds will just grow in your compost and you don't want that. You can also put your kitchen scraps in there, so any vegetable peelings or waste food. But if you're using the traditional compost method, steer away from things like meat and dairy because they will attract rats. The composting method I like to use is called bokashi, and it is a Korean method of composting, and it actually allows me to compost things like meat and dairy, coffee grounds, etc., the sorts of things that are not advised for the traditional method. Bokashi works by having a small bin and then some grain. So the grain that you sprinkle over the top is full of bacteria and microbes that break down the waste more quickly. It essentially ferments your food waste. So you don't get the smell that you would with a compost bin. If you do get any smell, it's a sort of faint vinegary smell if you're doing it right, and it's not at all unpleasant. And it also means that the food is broken down more quickly. There's also a byproduct. So at the front of your bokashi bin, you will have a small tap where you can drain out the liquid. This is a highly concentrated, nutritious liquid that you can put on your plants. So you just take a little bit of that, mix it with some water, and use that as a feed. It's fantastic. Let me know if you want to know a little bit more about bokashi, and I will plan in a video which will do a deeper dive on the process. But really, for beginner gardeners, the best thing to do is have a compost bin in your garden or on your allotment plot, and just regularly top it up with green and brown materials and turn it so that everything breaks down equally. Charles Dowding is one of my favourite YouTube creators, and he has a fantastic guide to composting, which I will link in the description box below. So that's it. 5 low-cost or zero-cost hacks to help you get growing. I would love to know if you are going to try any of these. Please let me know in the comments below. Or if you're a more experienced gardener, what have I missed? What hacks have you got to save money on gardening? And of course, if you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you'd support the channel by liking, subscribing and sharing it with your gardening friends. I'd be really, really grateful. But with all that said, that's it from me today. I hope you're all having a lovely week, and I will see you next time. Bye.